Hey, good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. This is Dr. Deborah Jenkins, your host for Black Talk Platform, and we're hopeful that you'll come on in. I know that in the Northeast the weather is very nice. There may be a little wind, but the weather is beautiful. The sun is shining, and I'm a spring person, and I'm really a summer person, so I like to be outdoors. I've already been out because I knew I needed a little sunshine in my life, but I'm back because this is Black Talk Platform's annual Women's History Month celebration. I am celebrating and amplifying the voices of dynamic sisters who I'm getting to know, who I've watched in social media as they do their thing. And I just really wanted to bring together a panel of Black women who I admire for the work that they are doing as presented through social media, and hope to one day know them offline as well. Um, but I wanted to tackle a few issues that are critical to our community and hear from these experts who are doing the work on the ground in their specific communities. We're talking about balancing work and life as activists. So I will definitely have a whole lot to say about that. Then also, there's this critical need for, in my opinion, us to protect Black children, particularly those who are in the foster care and adoption system. It is not stacked in our favor, as is the case for many things affecting Black life in the United States. And I really want to hear from a young woman who is working hard in her own community to protect not only her own children, but Black children in general. And then finally, how do we create sisterhood? Sisterhood that is not predicated on outside or external mandates, but sisterhood that we can connect to as Black women, and we're going to look at it through a literary lens. And I'm just so excited to have as a returning guest who was one of my panelists during the Black History program last month here on Black Talk Platform. Her name is Kat Saunders. She is a PhD student and majoring in African American literature from a woman's perspective. If I'm wrong, she's going to correct me, and that's just fine. And then, in terms of the protection of our young people, our precious babies, our future, I have with us today Miss Kimber Kennedy. I'm hopeful that my friend Reverend Dr. Dawn Snell will come on, but I understand that after church life, and if she's not able to, Miss Kat and I will sort of hold down the fort in the sisterhood area, not excluding Sister Kimber. So let me bring them both on right now so we can jump right into it. Welcome, Kat. How are you?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me again.
Absolutely. We were thrilled to have you last time. And you responded when I reached out to you, and I was really, really happy with your sharing. And, I have two children, they're young adults. And I have to tell the audience, as I shared with you, my daughter was so impressed with you. It just made me happy because she saw someone who's not my age, right? Someone who's closer to being her peer doing the darn thing and speaking the language that she understands as a Black young woman. And so I appreciate you and thank you for being here again with us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And then this is like a newer uh Twitter friend, Miss Kimber Kennedy. Hello, how are you?
Hi, I'm so nervous. I was just rushing. I took a long time to work on my presentation. This is my first presentation on a platform like this. So I've been working at it along with another business that I have. So I'm just really excited. I'm nervous a little bit, but I'm ready.
Please don't be nervous. I was saying to Kat before you got here that, you know what, a part of creating a sisterhood that I'm talking about and that I hope we get to is also creating a space where we're able to just be comfortable with each other. at least with each other. So right now it's just the three of us. And I'm saying that because we are the ones on this panel. I want you to be at home here at Black Talk Platform. And as I've said to Kat in the past, she's welcome back here anytime. You also will be welcome back. You have a story that I think the audience needs to hear. And we're looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much. I'm glad it's just the three of us because my wig's looking a little lopsided. I literally just washed my hair this morning and braided it up. So now that I can see that I'm talking to you, I'm just going to take 1 second to fix it. I'm so sorry.
Not a problem.
Don't wear a wig. I'm natural, but I just washed it this morning. So I'm like, there's no way I'm going to get a twist out done in time for this. I'm so sorry, you guys.
No. Please don't apologize. You're just fine. You're fine. We're all fine. I'm going to be very transparent here and say last night I had a speaking engagement, right? And the sister who invited me, she hugged me and she pulled down on my braids. I was like, it's okay. I'm taking them out next week. So listen, we understand the hair games, right? We understand the beauty and the specialness of our hair. However we present it, it's ours. We own it. And you look beautiful. Kat, you look beautiful. I'm doing my very best. I think I got a little sunshine and I'm ready to go. So let's get into it. So listen, ladies, I again appreciate both of you being here with me today. Last year I did like week after week after week of celebrating different sisters. But I thought this time we need to have a conversation around these things that are very important to us. Kat, I think you heard me say last month that I'm an underground activist. But during the pandemic, I had to switch to becoming a digital activist. And that's when Black Talk Platform was birthed. And so, you know, I'm very comfortable with the camera now. I've had so many problems, Kimber. Don't even worry about it. You look beautiful. We're ready for everything you both have to say. But in the life of an activist, and you both have activism in your bios. And I'm not saying your written bios, but in how I see you interacting in social media. Kat, you were on a roll. I don't know if that was Thursday, Wednesday, or Friday, but I said to her, Kimber, look, they need to hurry up and get a finger snap emoji because she was just killing it back to back to back to back. And that's what we need. We need the real. And that's what you do, Kat, when you're posting. She doesn't post as much as I do. You both know that. But when you do, you bring the fire, and it's with so much authenticity and deep thought around issues concerning our community. But we want to stay within the realm of sisters today, Black women. Let's talk about some of the things that can interfere with our ability to have a healthy balance while we're doing all of these things that we are doing out here. I want to shoot it back over to you first, Kat, and then you, Kimber. Kat, I'm not sure if you are a mother, but Kimber, I know you are. How do you both balance? I know the rigors of a PhD program, Kat. How do you eke out a little time to just do what you want to do, to have a relationship, to be a mother, if that is, you know, your station? How do you maintain this work-life balance? Beginning with you, Kat, and then to you, Kimber.
So I'm actually not a mother. So I just want to say that as a disclaimer. But I mean, in terms of the work-life balance, I think it's really hard because there's so many complexities in being a Black woman. So just sometimes just navigating yourself in the world can be very exhausting. So balance is very important, I would say. But for me, I think having time for myself and not being afraid to say no, of course, and maintaining boundaries. And I think that's something that we hear a lot of today. Like the word boundaries is something that's like thrown around all the time. But I think in order to really know what your boundaries are, you have to know who you are and what makes you tick, what works for you. And for me, I know that I need that time to recharge, like my time alone, and making time for things that I enjoy, like reading or yoga and things like that as well. I do want to admit that that isn't something that I've perfected in terms of work-life balance. And I don't want to say that I think it's a myth to get like that perfect balance, but I do think that changes in the different seasons of your life. So like a balance now is like, you know, I do have to put most of my time into my studies. So that's most of my time in terms of what I do. So my me time may only be, you know, my nighttime routine, which is a way that I balance it as well. I look forward to getting ready to go to bed because I know that's my time to like decompress and to really just focus on my spirit and my energy. It's not about work. It's not about having to go outside. It's just like time I have for myself and my thoughts. So that, I would say, having something to look forward to. And for me, that's my nighttime routine, like my yoga, my, steaming my face, my hot shower, all of that is what I think helps me balance everything. Because no matter what happens before that, I know that I have that to kind of like hold me and be my center. I don't know if that was a good answer or not.
Oh, no. It's not even about it being a good answer. It's your answer. And that's what works for you, your nighttime routine. And I appreciate that. And that's why we're doing this today, because both Kimber and I can pick up things from you and you can pick up things from her. And hopefully you all can pick up things from me, because none of us have perfected it. None of us have perfected it yet, but we're all just striving. And you are so correct when you say the life of a Black woman is, to me, unique. It's very unlike anybody else's life. We are looked upon to be these super women who don't even have pain. We're not even supposed to have pain. We're just supposed to keep navigating through this thing called life. And those pause moments, your nighttime routine is very important. For instance, I was sharing with my class the other night that I made a very conscious decision not to be a manicured person. I never do it. My nails look okay, but they're never manicured. And so when I see a sister with her nails well manicured, I'm like, I will give her a compliment, because it's something that I made a deliberate decision to give up because of the time investment, right? But for my feet, they have to be done. It's not weird. These are the things, these are the give and takes of life. Yes?
Yes.
Kimber, jump in there, please.
So for me, balancing activism along with being a mother, it's something that I struggle with at times, because I was homeschooling my youngest child. And so I made the decision to put my youngest child into school in order to focus more on my activism and my programs and businesses that I am trying to get off the ground. And so just mentally dealing with that, because since putting my youngest back in school, it kind of seems like there's been a regression, because when I'm teaching homeschooling, it's just me and my youngest child. And so when I put my youngest child in school and my youngest child was tested, he was ahead. And I've noticed as the school year goes along that there have been some things that I taught him that he has regressed a little bit on. And so it's just a bit of a struggle for me, but part of my outreach is youth outreach. And so I feel like, I can take out a little bit of extra time, maybe after school, and work with my child. But it's really important for me to also empower children within the community who maybe do not have a parent that has the time, or maybe does not want to put in the effort to educate their child at home. So it's a little bit of a struggle for me, but I know that as long as I keep on working at it, that I'll be able to balance it out a little bit more.
Yeah. So that was a huge sacrifice that you had to come to a decision and make. And you've seen the regression in your child. And so you're making up for it after you do your work and you all get home. I think those sacrifices are sometimes necessary for the motivated, right? We have to count ourselves amongst the motivated. Everybody in the community will not be those who will make these sacrifices, even to go and pursue a PhD. That's a motivated you, Kat. That is a motivated you, Kimber, to make such a hard decision to put your child in a school system where whatever you've given him or her is much more advanced than what they're going to get within the school system. But can you tell us the region that you live in? You don't have to tell us the city or state, just the region, because I think it will make the audience understand better why you felt that it was so necessary to pursue this activism on behalf of others' children.
I live in the Dallas-Fort Worth region, but I'm originally from San Diego, California. So okay. The school system between California and Texas is very, very, very different. And so, again, it was a struggle for me coming from the West Coast and placing my child into the school system, because my youngest child is a boy. He's my only son. And so to put my young Black male child into that environment was very hard for me, something I still struggle with, but I know that there are a lot of children who need what it is that I'm working on and want to present to the community. But when I say that I felt like I went a little bit back in time, coming down to the South and being along the Bible Belt, it's completely different here. So
yeah, I can only imagine. I've been away from there for a lot of years, but I do remember. Hi, come on in. She's here, guys. But I've been away from that for a very long time. But to be honest with you, I'm in New York. The school for school education for Black students is not necessarily more effective in terms of giving them the information that they need than in Fort Worth or even San Diego or perhaps the DC area. Black children suffer in this public education system. You know, I have two sisters who are educators. One is in the South, one is right here in New York. They are excellent. And, you know, others who I know are very, very good. But the reality is, it is the system and the way it's designed. It is not designed for the success of Black children. And we have to know that. And so go ahead. Mm-hmm.
No, please finish.
No, go on.
Okay, I just want to insert this really quick. During Black History Month, my oldest child, which is 14, she told me that they were learning about the Holocaust. I'm like, oh, the Black Holocaust, right? She's like, no. She's like, every year during Black History Month, we learn about the Holocaust. Every year during our month, they are being taught about the Holocaust.
Yeah.
So I definitely have a problem with that, because I'm like, if we're going to talk about any Holocaust during Black History Month, it should be the Black Holocaust. Why are we talking about that Holocaust that did not even happen here?
Yeah.
With that? But that was surprising to me that every year she says they teach us about the Holocaust during our month. We're not learning about us.
Yeah. And you know, it's interesting because the college where I teach, I don't know what made me do it, but I wanted to go and look at the holidays. I was just looking at the holidays, and I did see and confirm what your daughter is saying, that I think it's the third week in February. It's called Holocaust Awareness Week. And here in New York, there's a whole lot of money put into that awareness. The children have to mandatorily go and visit the Holocaust Museum here. You know, it's a whole lot. And so I agree with you about, you know, our month. There could have been any other month, but you would be surprised how much is in our month. You know, how much is in this 28 short days. And when we are lucky to have the extra day, you know, it happens. Listen, Reverend Dr. Dawn Snell has joined us. Let me bring her on. We have been friends for at least 25 years. I believe that is the case. She is a sister friend from a sister friend from a sister friend, and she is out of Connecticut. And we've just been really, really friends. We went through seminary together. Kat, I say that to you. We went through, I don't know if we went through our doctoral programs together, but we certainly supported each other through it. We have developed a long-term sisterhood where she knows she can call me and cry. I know I can call her and cry. We can call each other and scream. We can call each other. If we need to say a few words, we can say a few words. Y'all know what I mean when I say a few words. She is that friend, and I'm so happy she's able to join us today. I want to bring you on from backstage, and we are talking right now about work-life balance. Reverend Dr. Dawn, hello, how are you?
I just got in from preaching a 2-hour ride up, 2 hours back, you know, so
yes, I'm glad
please forgive me. I don't have the proper background, but I'm here.
We need you to put your camera down so we can see your whole beautiful face. I'm seeing all beautiful faces today because we are celebrating the beauty of Black women. That's one thing, right?
Yes.
I don't think I needed to put that in the title because we already know that you all are beautiful. Yes. Beauty resides within Blackness. Am I right? Or am I wrong? Okay. I make no apologies for loving who we are. None. Not one. No one can make me whether I'm here or elsewhere.
All
So
shapes, sizes, and colors.
yeah, that's right. From the darkest to the lightest, whatever and in between, we are beautiful. Dawn, we are asking, I was just asking about this whole first bullet, balancing work and life. You are very busy up in Connecticut. You work, she responds, and I don't want to just tell everything that you do, but she responds to violence. She's there for the mayor. She's there for the fire department. She is busy doing all of these things like we all are. Kimber just talked about her sacrifice to send her child to her last child to be educated as a youth back to public school after having homeschooled him for such a long time. But she made the sacrifice on behalf of other Black kids. Kat is so dynamic. I can't wait until I be quiet and hear her speak a little bit more. She is pursuing she's a PhD candidate. Let me tell people, when you are a candidate, that means that you are so close to being finished. She's just writing and trying to get it all together so that she can establish her own lane. But Dawn, can you tell us how you find a way to have a personal life? You are very involved with your nieces and nephews. How do you do this balance? How do you do this? The balance.
I don't. I'm going to be honest with you. And it's something that I do struggle with because the balance, because I don't have, I struggle with it. You know, I'm back seeing my therapist.
Okay.
Because, yeah, I've had some moments where it's everyone pulling on me. My great nephew lives with me now because he's living with his grandmother, his father's mother. She died from COVID last year. And when my niece, who I raised since she was 9, moved out, I really thought that I was going to have a break. But then Jamal had to come with me. Jamal's in college. I had to preach this morning. I had to get somebody to take him to White Plains to meet the bus to take him back to school in Seneca, New York. Okay. I'm always running. And it's deep that you ask that question because I'm really struggling. I'm involved in a couple of people's lives who have asked me to, they're in hospice, young people, to do their eulogy. I don't know. I don't know what else to say except for the fact just pray for me.
And you know what? That's real. And I'm so glad that you added that real element that so often we don't really address, and we don't even have patience for each other sometimes when we are experiencing these emotional mental health issues. It is a very real issue. Let me bring you back into the conversation around that, Kat. As you explore African American women in literature, aren't you revealing or having revealed to you through their writings their struggles as well as Black women? Am I wrong about that? I don't know what you're reading specifically, but have you encountered that any in the writings?
You mean like in terms of like just the complexity of the Black female experience in terms of that illuminating my journey, or I just want to make sure I have a question?
No, absolutely that. The complexity.
No, absolutely, definitely. And I think for me, it's just, I think the most transcendent experiences that I've seen are like the most turbulent, are the ones where the characters are visibly imperfect. And I think that's important as well, because a lot of times when we envision these relationships or even these conversations or just encounters, people think about the ideal scenario. And I think that there's so much beauty and so much just upliftment and evolution that can come from maybe a not so great encounter. Maybe you're not meeting someone at like the best chapter of their life or the best moment of their life. I don't think that that means that you can't be, what's the word for it, that you can't show empathy, or that cannot be like a bonding moment, and not necessarily trauma bonding either, but the idea of being there for someone or being that person, even just saying something nice. So not even necessarily having to have the perfect thing to say either. If someone opens up to you, just seeing something nice or smiling or embracing if necessary. But I think one thing I've learned, I'm just thinking specifically about the convent and Toni Morrison's Paradise. Now, it is a raceless text. So the idea that it does kind of exist outside of whiteness or natural racial paradigms, but there's a female space that comes about in the ruins of a convent, and these women are visibly imperfect. One woman, her kids die in the back of her car. This other person was like had a humiliating sexual experience, was like a former prostitute. You have these very imperfect women coming from all walks of life, but in this space, they can just be who they are. They can just be. And I think that when Toni Morrison, of course, was a Black writer, so I'm thinking in terms of that as being idealistic for what we can create and what we should create as Black women for Black women. These spaces where we are Black and we can't talk about the burdens of our life, but where we can just be. We can kind of like shed this outside. I don't have to be that for you. Like if I'm angry, I could be angry. Right. If I'm not having a good day, I can have a good day. If I'm involved in something that the world may judge me about or may label me or compartmentalize me in this way, I'm not that person or that label here. And that's very important, I think. And it's hard to do because there's so many ways and so many things that divide us. And a lot of times, like people, I think it's the word where they judge before you even realize that you're doing it sometimes, or people judge other people. And I think reading for me has, I don't know, it's like a mirror, like holding up a mirror to my interior self. And it's really helped me kind of rearrange my inner furniture. So the idea that you're coming to your own people in peace. And that's what's more important to me. Like I want to be able to come to other Black women in peace and be a peaceful, just a peaceful force in that way.
Absolutely. Kimber, would you like to, you said a lot and I want to respond to both of you and Reverend Dawn, but I want you to jump in there. I want you to feel as much on this platform as the three of us.
So I do apologize, but I did message I had to get my charger. So could you just please repeat the question? I know it's about reading books and I'm very well read, so I'm sure that I'll respond to it.
Well, so no, I asked her about the books because that's where her expertise is lying, but it was still just responding to Reverend Dawn's comments that she started out about the work-life balance and saying, I'm not doing well with that. I'm not navigating that well. In fact, I'm back in therapy. Now, of course, that was not for me to share with you. That was for her to share, but she knows wherever Deb is, she is free to share that. And that's the kind of sisterhood she and I have had over these many years. It might be aging us a little bit, but it's really aging us in love because I offer that to her. And in return, she offers me the 25. She offers me the same. And to what you just said, Kat, and this is probably where you can feel comfortable to jump in because you have a dynamic story too that we want to hear, Kimber. What Kat just said is really my goal. My goal is to create, not just for Dawn and I to have this relationship that we have. And in fact, both of us being in ministry, crossing the same circles all of the time over those 25 years, guess what? On one hand, we can count the spaces where we've been able to walk back and forth with other women clergy and have the type of relaxed conversation in truth that we have with each other, but what we're also creating here today in this conversation. And so I am grateful for her being in my life all these years. And I really think that we need to be replicating this throughout all of our lives and our sphere of influence. Go ahead, Kimber, jump in now that I maybe gave you a little more clarity.
So me also, so I was listening, although I went to get my charger. And so I like how open that Reverend Dawn was when she spoke. And so again, I do have an incredible story. I have shared some with you and I thank you so much for the opportunity. And so I can share a little bit of just where I am at. I am definitely at a period of rebuilding my life. There's something about the number 7 to where it is closing out a chapter and you are beginning another one. And so for me, that one of my platforms is OIDV, which is Officer Involved Domestic Violence. I dealt with that for the last 7 years on top of displacement and also a house fire that definitely devastated myself and my children. And so I'm just at a point to where I am starting to recover from that. and being able to go back into my activism. And I'm happy that I was able to share that with you. You were open with me. You offered me words of encouragement. And it made me feel like that I did not have to have any shame about the struggles I was going through. And so I just want other women to feel that also, because when I was displaced, I did feel very ashamed. I did feel like that I did not want to tell anyone that. I did not want to share it with anyone. But it was something that now that I look back, I should have shared. I should have reached out to people, but I just felt like I'm just going to deal with this by myself, because again, I was ashamed and I was embarrassed, even though it was due to no fault of my own.
Yeah. I want to, and I thank you for sharing that here. She had shared it with me. We have been talking in the back channel over there on Twitter, and I feel for you. I feel for you, but I'm proud of you, because we all have choices. You could have decided, you know what, really too big for me to say anything about. I just need to keep myself and my children alive. But you're actually doing more by raising this conversation to a different level, because we've had officers killed here, involved in officer relationships right here in New York. I'm sure not limited to New York, who have been killed by their domestic partners. And I think it adds a different layer, because as one married to an officer, a law enforcement officer, you guys have a whole different lifestyle than the rest of us. There's this image that at least I expect, and you can correct me where I'm wrong, that you all are held to a standard that you're held to in terms of the presentation to the world on behalf of those law enforcement officers who cause harm quite often to their domestic partners. And so the fact that you were involved in that for such a long time, having children, and was it a choice to have to be displaced and even homeless perhaps, or was it just the result of the separation, if you don't mind?
So the displacement happened because of the fire that I went through. It's in layers. So domestic violence is in more ways than physical. So starting with the OIDV, I don't fit the face of OIDV because most people envision, no offense, but a white woman. So when they see a young Black woman and the fact that I was married to a federal agent, that surprises people. And when I start talking about the domestic violence, they think physical, you were getting hit, but domestic violence is a lot of ways. So economic abuse is what I suffered most. My ex-husband was very passive when it came to the abuse because they're smart. They know how to do it on paper. They don't have to hit you. They will, use economics. So when I first left my ex-husband in 2015, the accounts were stripped. I was stripped of everything, and I was a housewife. I was a housewife our whole marriage. I never worked one day. So the displacement began with him, as always, controlling the money. And so I ended up getting on my feet, and it was a struggle. It was a very hard struggle. And I lived in hiding for 4 years from my ex-husband. After I left them, my children ended up being kidnapped for a whole year. So I had to find them. And then when I found them, I had reestablished myself in Texas. I had to go to Arizona to get them. And when I got there, I was not allowed to leave. So I never saw my place again, never went back to my job. I had to walk away from everything and fight for my children for over a year. So after I was awarded custody of my kids, when I got them back, kids that had never been away from me one day in their life until they were kidnapped for a year. When I got them back, I actually went into hiding for 4 years. And so after 4 years, I decided, okay, I'm going to come out of hiding because my ex-husband had went to court and used the court system against me. So I found myself having to go back to Arizona to battle him again. And so I went to Phoenix for 2 months where I had no family, no friends. We were displaced there. So that was in July 2021. So from being subpoenaed to Arizona, I ended up going there for 2 months. We were displaced, and then I was able to come back to Texas. So then I have to reestablish myself all over again. So then I did that, and I was able to obtain a home, and then the house burnt down 2 months later after I moved into the home. So then we found ourselves in the position again of being displaced. But thankfully, I was able to obtain a second home despite the housing market being a mess. And so I'm just very thankful that I was able to get through that. And the fact that I'm no longer in hiding. It was very stressful to run state to state with my children and live in hiding away from him, because hiding from law enforcement is different than a person, because there were so many systems that he could run my name through to find us. So every time that he would get close to finding us, we would be back in the car again, traveling to another state. And it's very hard to maintain your own place, but you're not able to put it in your name. And you're not really able to work 9-to-5 jobs because you're afraid that that person may find you. So I went from a housewife, and then again, here I am, an entrepreneur. I cleaned houses. I showed my daughters that there's nothing wrong with getting down on your hands and knees and scrubbing floorboards. Nothing wrong with that. And that's how I supported myself and my children, working under the table, cleaning other people's houses. That's how I made it up until now.
That's incredible. And I think it's wonderful that you expanded our view of domestic violence. While we all know that domestic violence occurs in more than physical ways, just listening to your story is just incredible, because there are a lot of people who are in relationships just like yours, who are also economically abused, who are also emotionally abused, never hand laid on them, but they are suffering. And you are empowering those women, and sometimes men, but we're talking about women today, to at least start talking about it. And the fact that your children were kidnapped from you for an entire year, you being the person that they saw all day, every day, all of their lives, had to be incredibly emotionally traumatic to you and the children. And that sort of segues us into the next portion of us talking about protecting our children. I feel like, excuse me, our children, we do for them, we love them. Reverend Dawn was just talking about her nephew who is now back living with her, her niece who just moved out. But it's still, all of these changes bring about a level of stress. Sometimes the stress is good, but not always. These steps that we take, and I'm sure with you, Dawn, that we take is in the name of protecting our children. Kimber, talk to us about why you felt so compelled to do this work on behalf of the children of others, not necessarily those who I don't know. You can tell us, who are victims of law enforcement abuse. Is that the population, or is there a greater population?
No, it's a greater population. It's really for our Black youth. That's what it's for. And you know what? I was honestly inspired by my oldest daughter, who is 14 years old, because she is the one who broke the cycle of abuse. I come from generations of abuse, and it actually was my daughter, when I went back to get them, when I found them, my daughters were being abused, all right? And I did not know that. But my daughter reported it to her school first, and nothing happened. His badge protected him. And it was through me fighting for custody of my children away from this man, and my daughter being abused every week, because for about 4 months we had to share joint custody. And every time that she would go on visitation with him, every week, he would spank my daughter to try to silence my daughter. And my daughter was 6 at the time she was kidnapped. So she was 7 by the time I came back. And I'm trying not to get emotional, but my oldest daughter is so strong, because every week she would go knowing that she was going to get a spanking, knowing that she was going to get in trouble, and she would still come back and talk. She advocated on her own behalf. And so when I saw my daughter unafraid, she was unafraid at a young age, then I just said, you know what, I'm going to continue to fight. And not only do I fight for her, I fight for every other child out there. So I was really inspired by my oldest daughter, because she literally broke the cycle of abuse within the family.
Wow. Well, the Bible tells us that a child shall live. And that's just incredible. We suffer so much, we go through so much. Reverend Dawn, can you speak to that type of abuse? I know you have some stories, but how do you engage in protecting children apart from your nieces and nephews, which I've watched you over the years do a great job? And young people going to be young people. That's a part of it. But how do you try to impact the lives of our young people through the protective lens?
I first of all, I have a passion for encouraging our youth. And when I see them do well, of course, I said, you may not know me, but I'm so proud of you. Uh, we may run into each other again, but know this, that you're a peculiar child. And I may not be your blood relative, but I'm concerned about you. I may never see that child again, but I do have people who do have children, grandchildren, also nieces and nephews. And I let them know that they can do anything, they can persevere, they can go places, they can be whoever they want to be. But it comes with discipline and in knowing that you don't have to be like everybody else. So when it comes to the discernment of knowing that a child is going through something, I do ask. I say, are you okay, baby? They may say yes, or they may not say anything at all. The ones who don't say anything at all and just put their head down, I'm like, you can talk to me. It won't go no place. What's going on? Um, I haven't like run into any seriousness, but I do know that some of the children that I have encountered have been going through.
Yeah.
And listening to Kimber, like your oldest child, knowing she was going for visitation, but she was also going for an unwarranted attack and abuse, and still able to function. I was young. I was 10 years old when I was molested by a cousin, and I had gotten really sick, and nobody knew why. It did not come out until I went to therapy in 1994. And also, and I don't mind sharing, I was raped by a boyfriend in front of his friends. It was because of those two incidents on my frontal lobe that was the type of relate I always sought to give and not expect anything back because that's all I knew. So I may not have been married, but I did have the quote unquote partner and relative. As a little child, 10 years old, and to you, Kimber, I say, I am so proud of you. I am so proud of you, your strength. And see, and sis, I'm jumping all over the place, but I need to jump into this. I want you to know that even in the ministry, there is a dissension, a schism. I don't feel that I'm not in a sorority. I don't belong to the links or any of that. But what I notice is in order to be the big person in ministry with a certain group of sisterhood, you have to be in a sorrow and you have to go to HBCU. I'm saying all of that, Kimber, to the fact that know that what you've gone through and knowing and getting a little tidbit of what we've gone through. Okay, I suffered the sexual assaults, but you're younger, but I want you to know that we still have the same desires to be better and to help someone else be better. I threw in the ministerial part because that is part and parcel of, I believe, a consequence of not addressing my pain earlier than I did. It's never too late, but for me, I feel if I would have addressed it better, I still have triggers, and those triggers can bring me back to being sexually assaulted at 10 years old. I just needed to share that.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you sharing that for the audience because it's important for those who may tune in. They may tune in at a time when something resonates with them and their life experience. And both of you have just shared a lot of personal information that I really appreciate you trusting Black Talk platform to be a vehicle through which you can share because I want to see us heal. You know, there's a whole lot of healing as Black women that we're never really able to access because we really don't get stories like yours, Kimber. We really don't get honesty from the pulpit like yours, Dawn. I'm quite critical. I'm a very critical person of the church because I've said this too, I think to my son not too long ago, that the church is literally responsible for the death of many people. And I'm not talking about slavery. I ain't talking about that. You already know that story. I'm talking about as we practice ecclesia, right? Whether it is the NOI, any organized religion, but I'm not qualified to talk about the NOI. I'm not qualified to talk about anything other than Protestantism. And I know that people have died, literally died, because of a false narrative being pushed to the point where we're not even able to, as Dr. Dawn just said, find support if you're not perhaps within the links or one of the sororities or as a male, a fraternity, of course. But beyond those type of things, it's just this message. And I think we got into this a little bit last month, Kat, where we're taught to just pray our problems away. Everything is going to be okay. And that has just never been enough for me because I've literally seen people take their lives. I've heard of people taking their lives. And it's just got to stop. And the effectiveness of the church has shifted to a bourgeoisie class. And that class also brings in an element of artificial faith that is leading to the death of many, to the point where that's why I like you so much, Kat. I don't know what your faith is, not asking, but what you share in social media through your knowledge as a literary expert in the writings of Black women, particularly, it can bring about healing that some will never, ever get in the church as it is today. And so I'd like to bring you back into the conversation before I circle back to you, Kat, and see, and I'm not asking you to be a critic like I am. I feel highly qualified to be critical of that which is harming the people who belong to God from the church. And not only the pulpit, the people, they're pretty mean too. The people pretty mean too. But I like to bring you back into the conversation because it really is not limited to us gathering as sisters. It's really about the souls of Black people, right? As W.B. Du Bois said in his book. But really, in terms of that soul, the spirit, how do you see it and the impact that I'll make it more general so that you don't feel that you have to be critical as I am. How do you believe faith being acted out or lived out by different women has really led to a lot of harm? Go ahead, Kat. You're muted.
I knew it would happen once. I got it out the way. No, but the idea that I would just say, like, just about not only the church, but institutions in general, they a lot of times can function as kind of like closets, and they end up being like a lot of skeletons and stuff in that, and it becomes a way, or I think sometimes a platform for compressing what you should say. So, in other words, I guess what I'm trying to say is the idea of I'm thinking about institutions and how they foment sort of a politics of respectability, which I think is what you were getting at, Dr. Jenkins. The idea of how these politics of respectability a lot of times can confine and really kind of smash people into how you should behave, what you should talk about, what you should think. And a lot of times that ends up not being the most.
I don't know who do you have two devices? Kat, do you have two devices going on?
I don't. I only have one.
No,
Yeah, there's some feedback. I don't.
Kimber, are you on two devices or like are you on the online and your phone?
No, I'm just
Because
on
this
one.
is what I've been hearing, this feedback.
I'm not at anything else except my tablet.
Uh-uh.
Oh my. I don't know where that is coming from. Let me mute out and see how that works. You can continue.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to throw off the show. I just
No, that's what it's been going on. Yeah.
okay. I'm glad it's but just to answer your question, I was just saying that I think it's the politics of respectability in terms of that, in terms of defining mechanism for people, in terms of leading them down, I would say, a destructive or detrimental path. So the idea that I would actually argue that even though it's called faith, I don't really think that it's what it is, if that makes any sense. I think the idea of what faith actually is versus what it functions as, there's like a dichotomy between the two of those. So people believe that they're practicing faith, but in the reality, they're socially reproducing a problematic ideology that foments the forces that are against them. So in terms of, and I guess not necessarily about not just about sisterhood, but I was thinking a lot when I was listening to what Dr. Snell and what Ms. Kimber were talking about in terms of just their experiences. And I guess just to comment briefly on that with regard to the question that you asked, Dr. Jenkins, the thing that concerns me a lot of times is that sometimes when Black women do speak up, and I think this goes to what Ms. Kimber was saying as well. I think, okay, sorry. But the idea that sometimes when I think people do speak up, that they're not, especially I'm talking specifically about Black women, when they do speak up, I always wonder if they're taken seriously, or if in terms of, I'm saying this because I remember I had a student back when I used to teach, and these were adult students, and she was a single mother and she had 3 kids. Long story short, she ends up being murdered by the father of 2 of her kids. And then it comes out that she was voicing it to a lot of the other African adjacent people in the school in terms of what was going on, like in terms of her life, like her being stalked by this person and this person showing up at her party and all this other type of things. So, and again, I'm not blaming anybody for what happened, but I didn't know about this until after it happened. But it really shocked and it hurt me, the idea that there was a pattern of things that were going on that weren't reported, and people were, I guess, were just listening, and it was like a conversation, but that it came to this tragic end, and it seems like there could have been something to be done. So I think in terms of just underscoring why sisterhood amongst ourselves is important, because a lot of times when these concerns are placed elsewhere, they're used to substantiate racist ideas about Black men or Black women, and they're not used to help us. So, and I think we see a lot of that same type of behavior and ideology that informs ideas of faith, which I would say that actually really isn't faith at all, and is used to get people to put their faith in anything but themselves, or in things that actually can help themselves and the collective evolve.
I totally understand what you mean, and agree also. You know, the challenge to it being faith. Oops, let's come back in. Let's all come back in. The challenge to this notion of faith. Okay, Dawn, I think it might be yours. I'm gonna mute you until you're ready to talk. Yeah, the to challenge the notion that it is faith is one that will receive a lot of pushback. But you know what? I think is a necessary, not pushback, but I think it's a necessary dissection that we need to do. Is what I believe to be faith truly faith, or is this what I'm just being fed and told is faith? Because we have our own agency. It doesn't matter who you believe in, what you follow. There is a unity, a oneness, that you combine with the person or the entity that you look to as your supreme person in terms of spirituality. But it's never exclusive of you maintaining your selfness. And I think that for me is made very clear in the Bible, but it's not always taught in the church, that people don't have to be a monolith with the doctrine of a said church or church body, but you get to retain who you are. And I think that is a big and a major issue surrounding whether or not Black women are able to thrive. I was listening to a lesson yesterday. I'm a Sabbath follower, so Saturday was it for me. And so I always look for classes and stuff like that. So I'm in a class and it was really going really, really well. But the teacher took a scripture and it seemed he was starting out. The scripture was two-parted. It was about learning and teaching, but the second part of the scripture was about, oh, it's a very famous one. Let me just share it. You all probably have heard it. It's about when Jesus went to the house of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. And Mary, the sister Mary, she was, sitting at the feet of Jesus. But Martha, she was around and she was gathering and making sure everybody who was in the house was fed, and they were comfortable and all that stuff. And Jesus ends up saying that Mary chose the better, right? So that was the way that the lesson was going. That was the direction that the lesson was going, is that you need to be in a place where you're able to soak up this knowledge, right, from the Bible. But the teacher of this class took great pains to bring the women down by telling them that while Mary chose the better, it's also really good, or even as good, that you know how to cook, that you know how to clean, And so at that point, I just went click, because time out for us being held hostage to the kitchen and to clean the house. There's so much more to our faith. And to me, the greater part of our faith is connecting to, in my case, the word of the Lord, right? And to the Lord himself through the word of the Lord, but not to have men or women, for that matter, tell me that I need to stay in the kitchen or clean the house. We already know that. We were raised to do that, right? But is that the totality of Black women staying in the kitchen and cleaning the house? I say it's not. And in 2023, I think there's a better way to convey the message of that, even that balance. Yes, I remember when I was in seminary, it was really hard. I had my first child, and when it was time for those papers to be due, especially when it was closing in on time to graduate, please, I had to let my husband know, house ain't gonna be clean. It's not gonna be clean, it's just those things that you don't do when you're trying to complete something. But guess what? I was the one who was doing it. But I did have the courtesy to let him know I wasn't going to be able to do it while I was trying to write these papers. And it looked messy, except for my son's room. His room was always clean. But the totality of the house, it went lacking. So for you to tell me that I should put that above the learning aspect that I believe that I've been called to do, it was off-putting for me. And I just really I couldn't stay there, because a part of the harm that we continue to be or make ourselves available to, and it is sometimes our own doing, is constantly being told what to do instead of being able to rely on who we believe we have been called to be, or who we want to be even. And Kimber, I know you've been waiting to come back in for a while, but Dawn, I really want to hear from you on that. And I also want to go back to you, Kat, to see what made you want to come out of the classroom to pursue your PhD in this manner. What was there, some burning fire? Was there some saying that I believe that a lot of Black women will be positively impacted by the sharing of African American women in literature? Go on, Kimber. Would you go ahead and share with us what it is that you've been waiting a long time to come back and redress?
Oh, no, I was just going to come back because I always first give the honor to my oldest daughter for my advocacy, because it's through her continuing to speak out that actually made me start speaking out. I just want to comment on a couple of things when it comes to the bias that, I'm sorry, I can't see the screen anymore, but that Kat was speaking on. There was a lot of bias against me just because of my ex-husband's title. So when I went to go get my children, I am speaking out about these things, but even people within my own family did not believe me. Even people within my family did not believe me. Okay, so it took for me to go to actual strangers. Even finding an attorney to help me with my case was hard, because a lot of attorneys did not want to go against law enforcement. So the bias, there is definitely a bias there, especially when it comes to Black women speaking out and also Black children speaking out. Because my daughter literally told someone, and she had a bruise on her, but as soon as her father came and he came in uniform, they released her to him. They said, hey, we believe him over her, and we're going to release her. And she continued to go through those things until I was able to get her, and she was able to tell me. And she wanted to tell me before, but she couldn't. When we were away from each other, separated, she could not tell me. So there's definitely a bias, especially when it comes to Black women and Black children being protected. When it comes to what the Reverend said about complimenting the youth, I just want to comment on that, because I was just in a Little Caesars yesterday. So I try to also compliment youth when I see them working. All right. There was a young man at the counter that was assisting me. And after I got my pizza, I told him, hey, I'm proud of you. Keep up the good work. I'm proud to see you in here working, because he could have been anywhere else. He could have been in the streets. He could have been, doing nothing or getting into trouble. So anytime I see youth working, I always compliment them. I tell them I'm proud of them. I might not ever see them again either, but sometimes I feel like it needs to be said. And I explain to my older daughter why it is that I do that. I do that because, like I told her, there are some people out here doing the right thing, some children doing the right thing, that never hear I'm proud of you, that never hear you're doing a good job. So if I can say it to them, if I could just be that one person to say it to them and make a difference, that's enough for me. And just back to why I advocate so hard for the children is because myself, it's not just my daughter, but it's also me fighting for my inner child, because I grew up as a broken child, and I ended up marrying a man like my father. So a lot of the times when the Reverend was saying that the things that happened to her dictated her relationships as she got older, that's the same thing for me. I ended up marrying someone that was like my father, and it was very detrimental to me, because it took me a long time to realize that being treated this way is not normal. When you're conditioned that these things are normal because that's all you know, it takes a long time for you to come out of that. And growing up, I did not have my mom around. She wasn't around. She was gone. So I'm just being raised by a man, and I was raised very latchkey. So to me being the woman I am now, it took me a lot of work, because it was through trial and error. No woman, specifically taught me. Many different women came into my life, but my outreach is also for myself, for the little girl in me, to just be everything that I needed growing up, everything that I wanted growing up. I was looking for a mother and a lot of different people growing up, but that's very hard, because at the end of the day, no one's going to love you like your mother's going to love you. So just searching for that for so long, it just really motivates me to this day to try to be what it is that I was looking for other youth. That's all I want to add.
No, that was powerful, and ooh, I don't want to be the one. I want us all there. That was powerful, and I thank you for sharing that. I don't see you. Let me see. Okay, there you are. Yeah, that was powerful, and that's a good enough reason for me. Reverend Dawn, let me bring you back in and see if you can respond to any of that, which I shared, and even what Kimber and Kat said before we make our way to our last segment. I'll mute.
Oh, okay. um, yeah, I was just listening. I don't because just talking particularly with Kimber, listening to her, it just stirred up something within me. I know that she's progressively doing better and doing what she needs to do, but I was doing more thinking than even thinking about a response. Um, and is it Cat or Kate? Please forgive me. Um, the work that you're doing, looking at these black women and African American women, women of color through literature, that is an awesome undertaking, uh, an awesome passion, and so to that, my ears definitely peaked in a more, I guess, positive, blessed way, because what I have found out over the years, every year I learn about more and more of our ancestral heritage when it comes to patterns and what we created and stuff like that. And I'm finding out so much more about what we as blacks and African Americans have contributed to this society, okay? Um, Even though they consider us marginalized. And it has been a blessing, and it is a blessing to know that you have taken on such I would call it magnificent task, because I'm sure there are those who I have no idea who have written uh, prose or books or their thoughts that you can find intertwined about their lives then. And so, but with Kimber, I'm still trying to digest what you went through. I know you have found some grace because you're still here, but it just went to my gut, and to know that that has gone on and is going on amongst our community, and it's not addressed, the financial abuse holding back so that you and your children can have a viable and decent life. I'm just boggled. It just boggled my mind. I'm stumped. I'm stumped. So that's what I have to offer right now. I'm gonna really have to meditate, chew on this some more. All the comments today so far.
That's fine.
I'm
That's
really
fine.
gonna have to chew on this.
That's just fine. Thank you, Kat. Did you want to say anything more? I did want to hear your inspiration for coming out of the classroom and pursuing your PhD in this fashion. I'm not saying anybody has to be remotely like me, but I do believe that the work that you are doing will transform a lot of black women's lives and even beyond. So could you share with us your inspiration?
Sure. So, I mean, I taught, so just a little background. So I did my undergrad at Howard University. I did I received and worked for a master's degree at Mills College. And then I came back to New York and I taught for 4 years before I started on the PhD journey about almost 4.5 years ago. So I would say in the time that when I decided to pursue my master's degree, that was in preparation for eventually getting a doctoral degree. So that was something that I had made, that is a decision I made then. But I would say in terms of my teaching experience wasn't necessarily the best. I'll be honest. That was that experience coming right after I came out of Mills College, which for those of you who don't know, Mills College is like this, they call it the Smith College of the West Coast. So it's very, I don't know how to describe it, but if you're a Black person going to that school, you will learn a lot about gender politics when you have boots on the ground, and you will realize that you will feel the exclusivity of the term woman. Let's just put it that way. And being a New Yorker going out into the West Coast, it's a very different vibe there. I would say racially as well. It's a very different vibe, and a lot of it was a very alienating experience being out there. I would definitely say so. Being Black, being a woman, and also being someone who lives a heterosexual lifestyle, which is not the majority there. So it was a very isolating experience. But I would say, like, me getting back into the literature that I've always loved, but I feel like Howard brought me into kind of like more of the Black literature, and it was something that I can actually study and kind of like take the reins on. It showed me a new world, and it also showed me new dimensions of myself, and it became a vehicle for honing my power as a Black person and as a Black woman by, learning about, the hot coals, to evoke James Baldwin a bit, that their feet went over. It influenced me. But I would say having that experience at Mills, and then having the experience being a teacher and being a Black woman in front of a college classroom, and just seeing all the resistance. I've had petitions to get me fired numerous times, having to show my ID to teach my class to prove that I work there. So all of these experiences, or the idea of a middle-aged white woman trying to fight me over a desk and interrupting my sessions with students to throw things in the garbage and pull things out the desk drawer because I was using it was a really, really traumatic experience, I would say, teaching and being very young at the time, doing these things and not having a community to speak to.
This was while at Mills.
No, this was in New York.
Oh, wow.
It was in New York. So I'm saying those experiences espouse the Mills experience, and then this come right after. It was a very rough 4 years. So I would say in that particular time, it definitely, it was something I already wanted to do, but I felt more called to do after that experience in terms of seeing that. And I think that I saw that as a deterrent, like, okay, taking these years off to work. But I would also say it gives me more direction now as a doctoral candidate, because I've had the experience of teaching in these environments already. So I know what I'm getting into, and I also know what environment I don't want to work in again. It's not mentally healthy. And I think in general, especially when you're a Black woman and you're existing in a certain field, you have a lot of people who are very envious of you too, that you've achieved that with. So you can't speak to them about that, because they feel a certain way about that. There's usually not a lot of Black women there as well in these type of environments. So there is no community a lot of the times in those particular environments or those particular departments. English or literature also still is very white, and so is writing. So that's also not necessarily a place for community. So I would say that to say that my motivation for going into the program was the idea to kind of, I guess, trying to evoke Earl Lovelace, catch my power through literature, and the idea of trying to inspire other people through that. Because we talk a lot about science and a lot of these other, not saying that that's not important. My brother's a doctor, he'd kill me if he heard me say that. But these other fields are very, very important. But I think the humanities, a lot of the times, are seen as like, you're not going to make any money, or like you're just kind of throwing everything away. But there's a lot of power in writing. And I think us being Black people in our history in this country, writing has always been a way that we've evolved as a people, that we've communicated with each other, that we've archived who we are and who we're going to be. So that's always been a huge force in who we are as a people. So that's something I definitely want to channel in myself in terms of going to get a PhD. And I would just say that for me, I feel as if I'm totally different now than when I started. And I definitely think it's because this whole collage of writers that have informed my mind. And I really do believe in the power of Black literature to change minds, but also to really change the world. As easy as it sounds, I really believe that.
No, oh gosh, what am I doing here? Putting you out and putting me back, and okay. All right. Okay. That's the great one. I appreciate what you've shared, and what you've said, because when I think about my daughter, She was accepted into an HBCU. Actually, both my children were. My son just simply decided not to go, but she was accepted. And I'm sharing this to say how important I believe your work is. I do agree with you that writing has been a very powerful tool for Black women in particular, but for Blacks to express themselves, ourselves, as well as music. I can definitely point back to times, and Kimber, with your experience, you may be able to as well, and all three of us, I'm sure, to times when music felt like it was literally saving my life, or I felt as if music was saving my life. I have a lot of books that I've read that also impact me in such a way that I can still recite certain passages from in order to get through the next hurdle, right? Or get over the next hurdle. But as it relates to her deciding not to go, and you probably commented when I said this probably last year sometime or whatever, she was accepted into an HBCU. She was excited because she really wanted to go to an HBCU. She came out of a high school here in New York that was a PWI. And this particular HBCU offered my child, who, and I'm not saying she's special, but she worked her butt off in high school, that she should have gotten really a full ride. She's that smart, right? But they didn't offer her any scholarships, no, nothing. But yet they received 50 Ukrainians here, and I had people, trying to fight me on this reality that was my life and her life. And, an 18-year-old is very vulnerable. So I'm saying that to say your work is really going to go beyond where you believe it's going to go. You're going to have young girls, young women like my daughter hearing you speak, throw out phrases like, I still need to go back and say, you've invoked 2 people today from your writing, from your learning, who I need you to go back and tell me their names again so that I can go and look their work up, right? But they're going to catch you speaking, and they're going to get a glimpse of your work. And it's going to help them endure while they are at a PWI, which she is, and feeling those things like you felt when you were at Mills and just being in California, period. But it will give her the strength, and other young women like her, the strength to go on. Now, when I think about Kimber's 14-year-old fighting for her own protection when she was 6, 7, and now she's 14, that's still a level of trauma that she's living with, right? And I truly believe, and that's why I really wanted you to be a part of this program, that the kind of work that you're doing, and hopefully you're told that often by your family and your friends, Kat, that the kind of work that you're doing is going to be so impactful to young women. And I believe it is women like yourself and like Kimber, who people like me and Reverend Dawn, who had to leave, should be reaching back to help you all to open more doors for you as we prepare to take steps back, because I really believe in the energy that you two bring to this phase of Black life that will be necessary to secure the continued strength that I believe is being eroded by different forms of media, in particular music too. And it's weakening our resolve. And I don't know if either of you agree with me, but that's how I see it as someone who is senior to you guys. And I don't really mean to use the word senior, because I'm not technically a senior citizen as yet, but I certainly am like an auntie age to the two of you. Do you see that what I'm saying? Do you understand what I'm saying when I say that the work that you're doing, and the work that you're doing also, Kimber, on behalf of our young people, and even for young women like yourself, trying to connect with that young child who was lost and without having influence of her mother or women who were strong in her life? You two are like examples to me of the way forward for our culture to continue to be as it has been. Go ahead, Kimber, before I ask Kat back into the conversation.
So I'm going to agree with you both that writing is very important. I am a writer myself. A lot of people have asked me to write about my life, but I'm just not at that point to where I just want to. It's a very emotional thing for me to sit down and write about myself. So when it comes to my advocacy, I have no problem sitting down and writing. I just did an ebook, which is actually a work journal. I was in therapy for 2 years after I got my children back. And so I was going through one of my notebooks and I just took some of the things from my therapy and decided to put it online and put it out there for other people because it helped me heal. So writing is very important, but the media does have a very big impact upon children. Growing up latchkey myself, and I was always at home alone, taking care of my sisters. And I'm just going to say this, and I didn't have a mom around or positive women around. And so I saw the movie Players Club. And I'm 37, so I don't know how old I was when it came out, but I was still young. I wasn't in high school yet. And from that movie, I'm looking like, hey, you know, I want to do this. I want to do this. There was nobody around to say, hey, don't do this or don't do that. So it's a lot of hyper sexuality that is pushed upon our children, especially the young girls. And then the music, I have to tell my children, hey, you know, this stuff in these rap songs are telling you to do all the wrong things. It's telling you to do everything wrong. That's what it's telling you to do. And it's putting it to a nice beat. So then you're singing along with it and you're manifesting that over your own self and you don't even realize it. So the media has a huge impact upon children, especially if a child is broken and there is no one there to course correct them and tell them that, hey, these things are wrong. There is a huge attack on our mental, on our Black children's mental. That's the strongest attack on us outside of physical. It's more a mental thing. So the things that are published in writings, the things that are put on the TV are very important. And again, like you said, I appreciate what Kat is doing because we do need more women like her to be writing.
Yeah, absolutely. Kat, did you want to add anything in before we actually really get into the sisterhood and building piece?
Sorry. No, I mean, I agree. I mean, one of the things I would definitely say is I'm very alarmed at how a lot of these social media platforms really use kids and really kind of like pimp children out. Like you can watch, I mean, I don't have TikTok and I don't watch it, but you can't escape these clips that are everywhere. And there's all these little kids dancing and all these kids doing stuff. And then you see all of these links on Instagram, like mixed Black kids, cute Black kids, and all these other kids. And it's like, these are people, sometimes people are volunteering their kids. Sometimes they're just finding pictures of kids online. And I even know people who like, they have these babies have their own Instagram. And I'm just thinking in terms of, how is this protecting your kids? And then they can't consent. They can't tell you this is what they want because these kids don't have any teeth and they can't talk yet. So I'm pretty sure they're not saying they want to do this. But also when they come into this, you see these kids, as soon as they see the camera, they're smiling. And I'm like, no, I'm just writing something down. They're smiling, they're posing for cameras. They're learning to perform. They're learning to do these things and they're learning to do things for like likes. And it's really problematic. And I would say also with, I think music, and just the media in general, I think that calls in the need for parenting because I was very sheltered growing up, like very sheltered. So there are a lot of things I didn't even know until I was like an adult, and I feel like if I knew like in a very like prescriptive way, I didn't know like slang terms for things. Mm-hmm. And I think when I think about songs like WAP or whatever, like Cardi B and Meg Thee Stallion, and you think that the kids are singing this, because I'm thinking I don't really even hear adults talking about it that way. It's children that are looking at this. It's the idea that, and especially for Black people, that's the way you make sure, like that's how you secure your future, I think, is like in this white settler space by attacking the kids before they even realize what's going on. And it's even the same situation I'm thinking with these interracial adoptions sometimes of Black children as well, because we're seeing the patterns of like children making decisions to be transgender or being in certain groups before they're old. They're like 4 years old or whatever. And I think that this is it brings in the question, what it means to protect your children, what it means to protect your children. And what does it mean? You know, gentle parenting, I get that as well. And I get the idea that we're not the same adults that our parents were and that things are different, 100%. But at what point are we not protecting our kids anymore in terms of them being overexposed to things and not having that innocence that you need as a kid? Because you think your parents are like all over the place, don't do this, don't do that. But that innocence is because once you lose it, you can't get it back.
You cannot get it back. And that's very insightful too, because you see it everywhere. I remember one of my after schoolers, he was probably 8 years old. Whenever, well, he's about 11 now. I really don't remember how long TikTok has been around, but he was a TikTok influencer at 9 years old. And the family's a little problematic. Mom is fly girl, they're cute, And I remember my assistant saying to me, wow, he's wearing Balenciaga. I'm not even trying to be funny. I didn't know what that was. I know much more about it now, but I knew nothing about. I said, well, what is that? She's like, oh, so she shows me a pair of Balenciagos, and I was like, this kid, this kid is wearing that, and so I happened to see them at a Knicks game a couple of weeks ago. We were all there, and I was really surprised because he had on a pair of, I guess it's called Yeezys, Kanye West shoes. I don't know what they're called because I just don't buy that name brand stuff. I have a whole economic reason as to why. But he had these on, and I was really surprised because they keep him pimped out, I'll say, or just in the latest gear. But I said, well, I know his father also, and his father likes to think that, likes to be Black positive. And he's probably wearing that as a protest because this child should have had some brand new shoes by now, because I don't think anybody's really buying them. But it was like a protest. Nike, you're going to drop him, or whoever Kanye was with, Adidas or whomever, you're going to drop him. We're going to keep wearing his shoes, So I was really surprised because my eyes went directly to what he was wearing. But he's up there dancing. I don't even put my kids had to tell me, would you please stop putting our pictures once they got older? But then because I became a little bit more public too, I needed to stop putting their images out there because I don't trust people. And sometimes you can't even trust us as Black people, but I certainly don't trust white supremacy to do right by my children. And so there are things that are going on here. In terms of the music, I try so hard not to over criticize, not to over criticize Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion for that song, right? And here's why I don't mind criticizing them. Because they had already made a considerable amount of money. But when it's these younger people who are like given these horrible 360 contracts and they take them, but they've been living in poverty, I don't heavily criticize them because there's someone not grooming them in the right way to have pride and to not expose yourself. It's nothing to see girls walking down the street with their butts hanging out just on a normal day, going to classes, and no one is really monitoring that. This is no longer a time that we live in where they would just dump those really scantily clad clothing in a bag. They're coming out of their homes like that. And so it really speaks to what we're not doing as parents, as those who are elders to these young kids, to be able to steer them in the right direction. And so again, that brings me to this conversation around sisterhood. How is it that we are able, how are we able to build sisterhood if we are not able to reach back and say, well, I got this is a lesson that I took from my mother, my aunties, my older sisters, and now I can create these things in relationships with other females, other Black women. And Kat, your subject was to be speaking about love, a literary love between Black women in Black literature. How can we use those relationships as presented in Black literature to create these sisterhood circles or relationships that we desire to have, but we often don't have?
So admittedly, just sort of picking up from a previous comment that I made, this is something I really struggled with in terms of when I was just really examining kind of like my mental canvas of text, like in terms of the relationships. Because I will say definitely just thinking, because I work closely right now in this dissertation phase with Toni Morrison's novels. So I'm just thinking in terms of her, because most of her books are like, they are inundated with the relationships between Black women, the ugly, the beautiful, the complex, they're all there. And I think like in terms of what what I think we can take from them is the idea that there is no perfect relationship. And I think that sometimes also, even if we don't have a direct relationship with somebody, like we all have like an ancestor or the idea of connecting with that. And I think for me, and not to get like too mystical or, you know, two things with that, but I think it is really important to keep in mind that there are people that have come before us, because there's a lot of talk on like the present and the future, and the idea of a lot of models of sisterhood doesn't necessarily have to come from family, because some of us do have people that are all around us, but maybe they aren't the most positive relationships in terms of that. But in terms of looking how other people succeeded in the relationship, in the sense that it wasn't perfect, but it lasted a long time, or it was, because I'm thinking specifically about a moment in Sula. So that it's about two friends. They're completely opposite. One friend betrays the other by sleeping with the friend's husband, and it's like this whole really ugly thing. But what I think about is that the sort of very liberated or nuanced woman passes away, and the first person she wants to tell about her experience is her friend. And I thought that that was like such a powerful sort of moment, in the sense of like, despite everything that happens, despite all of this, that's still the first person you want to talk to. And I think the idea of cultivating sisterhood is the idea of creating that, or being that person for somebody. Like, oh, I want to talk to this person, or having somebody to have that for. I mean, in terms of the trajectory, in terms of getting there, I guess I don't really have a clear path in terms of doing that. But I think that that does start from sort of renegotiating, cementing a more firm and, I don't know how to say this, strong portrait of what it means to be Black. Because I think a lot of the things that pull us apart is the idea of sometimes ill feelings about Blackness in general. And I would say most of the time, that's what causes division, I think, sometimes between Black people, or causes people to judge too often, or causes us to kind of like divide. Whereas I think if there's an idea of like, if we genuinely love Blackness and Black people, and genuinely want us to succeed as a collective, and I don't think that necessarily means rooting for everybody Black either, as Issa Rae says. I think it's much more complicated than that. But the idea of coming from whatever that space is, I think that would be a good foundation. But I think about that moment a lot when I think about sisterhood between Black women, because that really is sisterhood. That I can't wait to tell someone, or the idea of really leaning on someone, not in a codependent type of way, but in a way of like, I don't know, I want to say completion or supportive, or I can't really think of a perfect word for it.
I mean, Kimber, did you want to jump in before I come back into the conversation?
I just want to touch on, I think that comes a lot into mental conditioning when it comes to how we view one another. And I think that that starts really young, just by the societal norms that we see, the images of each other. And I want to touch on when Kat said that she grew up very sheltered. I think that the market and the media is so oversaturated with the negative images of us. I'm a helicopter mom. So my children are very, very sheltered. My daughter has always gone to good schools. This is a child that when I take her to school, I pick her up from school, I'm at home when she's here. I don't allow her to have a cell phone. There's been many times where there's not a TV in the house. If there is a TV, it's just an hour a day of watching TV. That's it. So I'm on top of everything. I'm going through rooms, going through backpacks, on top of everything. This is a child that's very sheltered and goes to a good school district. And she's an honor roll student in a college prep program. But still, she'll say things to me that I don't understand, because I'm like, you've never lived one day of your life in, I guess you could say in the hood, but you will have certain mannerisms, or want to dress a certain way, or want to do certain things. And it's because these are things that she's being exposed to through social media. And then I'm thinking, well, how are you being exposed to these things when you don't have a cell phone and you don't have social media? Because all it takes is her to go to school.
Yeah.
And then she's exposed to that. And then she goes to school within a certain tax bracket. And I'm like, well, none of you children have lived in the hood. So why are you trying to act like that? Because that's what the TV is telling them that they should act like. I tell my daughter, I don't act like that. You don't live around anybody like that. So where are you getting these mannerisms from? It's because that's what's being shown to them. I tell her, you have this image in your head that that's what you're supposed to act like. As a young Black girl, you're supposed to act ghetto. You're supposed to have an attitude, even though I'm not showing her those things. But she's being exposed to that at school. And these children that go to her school live in a great neighborhood. Most of them come from 2-parent households, and they come from a high income household. and they still want to act thuggish. They still want to act like that. And so me being there all the time and sheltering her and feeling like, you know what, I'm doing everything I can to keep her from these things, she's still being exposed to it. And it's just for some reason that a lot of our youth feel like they need to act like this for whatever reason. They feel like they need to act negatively or within a certain way or have certain mannerisms because that's what it means to be Black.
Yeah, it is quite a quandary, I think. It's interesting because my son and I were out today and he was sharing with me how he said to his friend that there are two types of parents in our community. You know, he said the parent who wants to ensure that their children has all the latest name brands, like we were just talking about, you know, and just, you know, and they'll send their children to the public schools. Then there are those parents who will sacrifice and send their children to private schools so that they can have like you know, a better start or whatever. And he said, well, I know that I was a part of that second group. And it wasn't just that though. He went to private school his entire grade school. My daughter, we took her out when she was getting ready to enter the 7th grade. That was the best thing that we'd ever done in terms of her academics. She was always very smart, but the middle school in our community was a very good one. And we just never thought of the public schools, right? She went there, and my whole thing was what you're talking about, being influenced in terms of the dress and stuff. So she gets there and they still wear uniforms like in her private school. But academically, they had just gotten a Black male principal. It really matters who's educating our students. It really, really does. And it really matters who is the principal, because he or she are able to consider the children, you know, who is the predominant number of children. So the school, she went on a college trip or something like that, and was so, you know, very, how shall I say, very, basic, I'll say, just because I can't find the real word. The reason why she ended up wanting to go to this particular college, it was because of the cafeteria food when they ate as visitors, right? But she ends up going there. That is where she is. But she would not have gone there had she not been exposed. I don't think anyway, had she not been exposed in the 7th grade to that opportunity. Now, did I have her having a problem transitioning from being in a predominantly white private school atmosphere to now being around your own people? You know, yes, but I had instilled in her to always know who you are. And that's why, you know, Dawn and I, we've been friends all this time, but guess what? I don't dislike any, and she didn't say it either, that I don't dislike any links. I don't dislike any Jack and Jill. I don't dislike any sororities. Had an opportunity to put my kids in all of the Jack and Jills and me to become a Lynx and a part of Lynx and a sorority. My own decision to not do so. But for those who are, guess what I'm not doing? I just don't allow these divisions that are artificial in our community that become very real to become a part of who I am. And so I said all that to say, I think the children are all going to struggle with peer pressure. You know, they're all going to struggle with peer pressure. They have whole shows about the Amish now. They want it to be, these are people who were raised in that very conservative Amish lifestyle. Now they're coming to New York and other places because they want a glimpse of the other side. I think that's a natural part of life for all of us. We seek those things that have been either taboo or we just haven't experienced. But I do believe that your teaching and even your parents' strictness on Kat made you the people that you are today. And this is what will help to inform the generations of the future. I love the fact, and I'm going to be quiet and let you guys get back in there. I love the fact that you said we forget often in our conversations those who came before us, the ancestors, and even to the point where we are able to where we may be those ancestors here today, right? Having a lot of their characteristics today as those stories have been passed down to us by elders in our families, and just even through the literature, to be honest with you. How do we integrate that into building sisterhood? And I'm not asking you both to have the answer, but just ideas around how you create those safe spaces where you can have those type of relationships with your Black sister friends. Either of you can go first. It doesn't matter.
So I just wanted to touch on what you said. I'm sorry about the school thing. So when you were talking about transitioning your daughter to a public school, so my kids have always been in public schools, but my daughter was always the only Black child in her class until last year. And then I put her into it's still a good school, but it's more diverse. So now she goes to school with actual Black children. And for a long time, I felt like, because of my personal experience coming from Los Angeles County, where I went to when I was younger, I went to a predominantly white school. And then I came down here as a youth to Texas, and being placed into the schools over here were rated like a 2. So it was a culture shock for me. I had never seen so many Black people in my life, and the Black kids were mean to me. They bullied me. They told me I talked white, that I dressed white. And it was just a horrible experience for me. So when I had kids, I said, well, I'm not going to put them in a Black school. I'm going to put them in a white school. So I always had my daughter in predominantly white schools. And for some reason, I felt like that was better. But my daughter told me recently, you know what, Mom, I was bullied. I was bullied the whole time that I went to school, up until I started going to this school that she goes to now, where she goes to with Black children. So it really made me take a step back and look at things and just listen to my daughter when she told me what she experienced. She did not feel pretty going to school. She didn't see anyone that really looked like her besides a handful of students. And so now I definitely know better. And as far as my son, he's getting homeschooled when this year is over. Just, they will not corrupt my male child. But I just want to comment on that sometimes we think it's better to put our children into white schools, and it's definitely not better. My daughter always had her hair done, always had nice clothes on. She still got bullied by those children at her school, and she's always been in advanced programs. So even what she dealt with being in advanced programs from other students, trying to get her kicked out, trying to trigger her, trying to get her. So it was a lot of counseling her not to respond to a child sitting next to her, calling her the N-word, because she was purposely trying to provoke my child. And I had to continue to tell my child, she's trying to get you kicked out of this program. So I apologize for not going on to the topic that you asked me about, but I just wanted to touch on that experience that for a long time I thought my children going to a white school was better for them because the school had more money and the education was, I guess you could say, it was like maybe a higher form of education, but what she dealt with from the students there and the staff there, whether it was the microaggressions from the teachers and the administration, to just downright being bullied by the white children that she went to school with.
Yeah. No apologies necessary, because you're here talking about the protection of our kids. I like the fact that you apologize. You recognize what your daughter was going through, and that she's open enough to tell you her struggles, and you put into action corrective action plans. Hi, Dr. Osiris in Hotep. And I'm thinking you put wow up there upon hearing Kimber say that, this is sort of common in our communities. When we have a little bit more, we do believe that first off, we have to put our children in white predominant atmospheres of academia. Let me be very clear. My daughter's high school, it was a predominantly white high school, but it was a public school. It's one here in the city. He's saying that his granddaughter experienced the same thing and in a similar school. And so we trade off so often, believing that it's better. Well, yeah, it's better for them. They never want us to migrate over. The integration that was to come never really came, because if it came with a whole lot of resentment and our children being bullied and made to feel less than, and as if they weren't as good as or even smarter than, even though they were, and are. Kat, I saw you shaking your head as you were listening. Talk to us. You're muted. You're still muted.
Okay. No, I just when we talk about protecting our kids, and I'll say this at the risk of being contentious, I actually think that, and I feel like that's the way I was also raised as well, to believe that's like that a way to protect our children is to not put them in white schools. And that's like flat out, especially when they're young. Because I think about, and and this of course goes with a lot of teachings by Black psychologists. I'm thinking of like Bobby Wright. I'm thinking of I know like Dr. McIntosh in New York City as well. Like so they talk about that extensively. And these are people who are in a high tax bracket and people who have studied this extensively. That, and Dr. Amos Wilson, of course, how do I forget that? The idea of that's not a way to protect your kids at all. And I think especially when you think about going to colleges, or people who want to go to colleges, you may not get a chance to go to HBCU. But I think the idea of having that foundation, I would say as well, is very, very important as being a Black person. And it's not going to be perfect. And of course, the first school is in the house as well. So what you put down in foundation as well. I mean, in terms of, I remember that, like watching Malcolm X speeches as a kid. So the idea of, yeah, you see the outside media, but when you see these huge forces or huge pillars and what it means to be Black, everything else looks different. I can't explain it. Even if it doesn't make sense until later, it's like a different type of view. But I would, that's something I feel like I'm vehemently against. And I'm not a parent, so I'm not speaking from a position of authority, but I will say, like, the idea of being, even now, like being in a doctoral position, you can see people now that are still dealing with that. The idea of, okay, this was superior, or I felt like I was superior, but there's something missing. And I think also it can be hard to retrieve that as well. Not saying that it's impossible to, but I and again, of course, that's social reproduction of the colonial idea that everything white is better, that the white man's ice is colder. So the idea that because you're over there, you're increasing your proximity to whiteness and doing these type of things. And you will see these ideas also in Black spaces, including even in HBCU. Yeah. So, I mean, no space is going to be perfect. And I say this like in terms of, just to go to your question, actually, I haven't found any like sisterhood or close relationships in my doctoral program or in my trajectory at all as a doctoral student. But I will say that in terms of, I do have that in my life and other places. But the experience at an HBCU, even though it may be, I guess, overtly singular, it's not the same type of loneliness and the same type of depths or the complexities of being in a white space. Because it's like, even if you are with people, there is something that comes with that. You're alone and you know you're alone. If anything goes down, it's on you. Yeah. Because there was something that went on where they said that Black women were evil when I was at Mills and we deserved to be lynched. And it was like this whole thing. And it was like an anonymous post on a Facebook website. And everybody's so shocked because it's, even though this is America, it's still very shocking when white people are racist. So everybody's shocking. And I feel like that's shocking too. That's part of racism. That everybody's, oh, and knowing good and well, you were probably the one that did it, or you know someone who did it, but being shocked, that's part of the racism. But I think the idea of dealing with that and being able to juxtapose that, if you're a person that's born to stand out, you'll stand out in a Black environment as well, and you'll meet adversity. It'll make you stronger, and you may feel loneliness there. It's not going to be perfect. I don't like selling that people in terms of the idea of that being perfect, but it's no comparison to what a PWI can and will do to you mentally. And that's very, and we need, even if that's where you work or that's what you do need these Black spaces or these Black sisterhood relationships in your life. Even if not in your profession, you need that in terms of that balance, to go back to the first question, to maintain that balance in your life. And there has to be, I think, also that balance in you, that center in you. You know who you are.
That's right. Absolutely. No. That was perfectly said, because I think about the situation with my own daughter. The reality is we could not afford to just simply send her there. But I was just so turned off when they accepted these others over her. You know, they didn't even try. And so I was speaking to someone, last night, I was speaking to a mother whose daughter was also accepted in the same HBCU, and they didn't offer her any money. And she's a good student, according to her mother. I'm just telling you the truth. My daughter is a very exceptional student, and they offered her nothing but gave 50 scholarships to the Ukrainians. I'm still mad. So we did not have the resources to turn down this school. That did give her quite a nice package, right? In addition to that, this is how the whole feeder thing worked from the 7th grade trip that she took down there. We got there for her orientation or something late, right? But just the person who we approached because we were late. They'd already started going to the different colleges at the university. It's a pretty large and sort of well-known college, university. He was the director of, no, he was like the provost or the dean or something like that of admissions or something. He happened to have worked at NYU in the same capacity, which is how it became a feeder school, sort of. And, they had given us the package. I had run all the numbers. I was like, you need some more money, So I had her write a letter. And this is what a lot of Black families don't do. So I'm telling all the Black families right now, don't just say they're not giving us enough, go back again. I had her write a letter and say, I've gotten this amount from this other school. She had gotten more money from Seton Hall University over here in New Jersey, but she really didn't want to go there. But that's where she was about to go because I couldn't afford the school that she ended up going to. So I said, let them know how much you're getting from Seton Hall and ask them, can they give you more? Guess who does that all of the time? White families do that all the time. So I want you to know, Kimber, before they get to that age for college, this is what you can do if they're not giving you a nice enough package. Again, I was too upset with this HBCU, so I didn't even try it with them. But they definitely gave her more money. They know that they need the diversity. It's plenty of Black students there, plenty. They now have a Black president, and I think they're moving out of the PWI category. That's what my daughter told me, because there are more of us. Here's the problem that I have with her school, Kat. I keep saying, go and join the Black Student Union. Go and join the Black Student Union. Just like at the college that I teach at, the Black Student Union is pretty much not Black Americans. So there's still not an identity, at the school that I am at, it's mostly Africans from the continent. And so they're trying to create and continue their culture in the United States. Well, she's found that too, at hers, but I'm like, you know what? There's enough of y'all down there. Go on and go back again, or find this area that there's Blackness. So we have to keep pushing them once they're in those PWIs, to create that environment of their own culture there, because they are there. They're just sort of scattered. She's a little turned off because a lot of the guys are like divestors. These are all the things that we experience as Black women in a general sense. And I'm thinking it's going to make her stronger in the long run because she's there. She had that stint in middle school where she was around her own people. It was like a breath of fresh air to her, like your daughter now in the school that she's in, to be around her own people. We underestimate the power of being around each other. We're going to get some stuff in there, but I'd rather be around us any day. I honestly would. I really, really would, than to only be around the dominant people in this society who are constantly telling us that we're not good enough.
I'm sorry. I just want to speak to what you and Kat said. And so I'm going to say it just out loud, live. I don't care. There is a danger. And I'm saying this, there's a danger to sending our children to these white schools, especially when they're young, because they're unable to identify the microaggressions against them. They don't recognize that. So they're too little to recognize it or to even vocalize it to you because they don't understand what's going on. And so little microaggressions that I see with my son is that when I sit down to work with him at home or, go over something that I know that he knows. I know that he knows this because I've taught it to him personally myself. We've done it many a times. But one time he said such and such, oh, those are hard words. Those are not hard words. Who told you that? My teacher. I said, well, they might be hard to her, but they're not hard to you. And so I told my son, well, spell that word. It was 2 words. He spelled them just fine. So what has you thinking that this is hard? It's because your teacher told you that, hey, these words are hard or these words are tricky. And then another thing is that he gets tested on sight words. And so he knows all of his sight words. But he told me, when we were going over them recently, well, sometimes I get confused. Who's telling you get confused? You're not confused. You know these words. So why would you think you're confused? And then he said, well, my teacher doesn't give me enough time. So I had to correct him and say, well, it's not that you're confused about anything, but to even implant that into my son, And I've had to send emails, talk to the principal about this, because I had to tell the teacher, I want you to be very cognizant of what you're telling my child. He's a small child. So for you to tell a small child that this word is hard, that it's not hard to him. Or for you to rush him and then say, well, maybe he's getting confused, you're planting seeds of discouragement within him to where he might feel like, well, he can't do that, or he'll hesitate to do that. So that's what I mean by little microaggressions. And whether they know that they're doing it or not, whether it's intentional or unintentional or unconsciously doing it, it's just even implanting those things because maybe it's their bias. Maybe they think that your child's not as smart as the others. And it's just those little small comments that they say, those little small seeds that they plant that will just build up and grow and grow and grow. And it actually discourages your child. So it's honestly a danger sending your child into these spaces. And then also the fact that they're gone away for so long, away from us so many hours a day with these people that my way of thinking has changed more so now that I have a Black male child. With my daughters, I didn't worry so much, even though my daughter was getting bullied and I didn't know for a while. But it's very different with my son. This is a Black male. And when you think about Black males, most of the teachers, they say up to 61% of teachers are white women. And when you think about how a lot of white women view Black males, then you have to look at, well, how are they viewing my Black male child? Because a lot of them are afraid of our male children. And people don't like to speak on that or comment about that, but that's just the truth. They're afraid of our Black male children. They're repulsed by our sons. So they don't want to be in there teaching our children. And they will discourage our children. Even if they see a light within our child, they'll see that your child is smart or very intelligent, then literally they will go out of their way to plant that seed of doubt within our children.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that. Let me just give you all this longer comment from Dr. Imhotep that I can't put up here because it'll just cover the whole screen, but I wanted to share it. He said it was a Catholic school that his granddaughter went to in Tarrytown, New York. It was said to be a better school. That's what we're always told, and we pursue it, right? Because we want the best for our kids. They wanted her money. She raised, but acted nasty to her. Plus, she traveled abroad and would bring them gifts. And actually, she ended up there so she wouldn't be a year behind because her age or her birthday, where it falls. Naeem and McIntosh, as you mentioned, Kat, are great in explaining the psychology. And so is my model, Dr. Amos Wilson, you also mentioned. So we have to look these guys up. But Dr. Amos Wilson, I definitely would have you use those resources that Kat has just named. I raised my kids before many times with the works of Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu, Doctors Nathan and Julia Hare, and Dr. Amos Wilson, because I realized early on, and even before I had my son, that I was going to need to shore them up with some really, really powerful and strong teachings from Blacks. I didn't know where they'd be going to school. I didn't even know that I'd be having children when I did. And also Dr. Ray Winbush, he's over at Morgan State University, has a wonderful book called The Warrior Method. He's still teaching and he's still alive. I think Dr. Nathan here is still alive, but everyone else has gone on. But their work still speaks volumes. It's still relevant, and we add to those names. Dr. Naeem, what is Naeem's last name or first name? And McIntosh. Kat, if you want to throw that in the comments, I'll pin it there because I really want people to go away with some resources that they can use. Listen, I really think for the Black community, one of the major things that we've been deceived about is being bored in history class. We need to stay awake. Our children need to stay awake so they can know the lies that are being taught, especially at this critical time now where they are preventing so much truth from being taught in different states, like your state of Texas, Georgia, Florida, and it will pretty soon be all over the country if we're not very careful. But I've always taken the approach that we have the first responsibility, as you said before. We are the first teachers. If we do our job well, that our children, they may get in trouble at school for speaking up and out when a teacher says something that they know already is not true, but they'll be able to prevail if we then go behind them and support them when they are. I saw a friend yesterday, post that he told his son, who's a little boy, he's a little bitty boy. I can't remember how old he is, 4 or 5 or 5 or 6 or something like that. If someone hits you or bullies you in school, you hit them back. And then you tell the teacher. That's a whole shift in the way we've taught our children, right? We haven't been teaching our children that because there's something in Blackness that tells us we always have to be the good person in line. And it doesn't make him bad to defend himself. I actually applaud this friend of mine who is teaching his son like that, because how many times have we taught our kids run to the teacher and the teacher never intervened and help them? And so he's shifting the paradigm for that next generation. Dr. James McIntosh. Oh, Naeem Akbar. Yes. I've read him too. Have a couple of books by him as well. Thank you, Dr. Inhotep. So ladies, we are coming to the end right here. This has been really fulfilling and enriching to me. Dr. Inhotep, I still got to get you on here one day. He is such a loyal supporter. I don't know if you were here when we were talking briefly about the music, and I want to get you on here because you and we had some talk some time ago about music, and I don't remember what it was about. Oh, I know, I do remember. We don't have to go into it now if we want to talk about it another time. I'd love to get you on here for us to talk about it. But certainly, ladies, we barely scratched the surface on this notion around this notion of creating sisterhood in such a way that we are able to sustain ourselves. And I appreciate you also sharing that you don't necessarily have it in your doctoral program, but you do have it. We have to have that in our lives. It doesn't have to be a slew of people. It doesn't have to be a lot of people. And Kimber, I hope you have it as well in your life. So
well,
as we go ahead.
I have it now. and I found the grassroots movement on Twitter. So that has
good.
I just got Twitter in November and I'm just like, I love it. So
I'm glad. I'm very happy to hear that for you, and to make those relationships where you can more concrete, so that you can continue to grow as you do this great work. I know you wanted to share about your organization. Please go ahead and do that in your closing remarks.
So I have two nonprofits, I guess you could say. One is AMIS, which is my OIDV nonprofit, just brings awareness to victims of officer-involved domestic violence. And then if you look for me on Twitter, I am 10th Power. And so my 10th Power program is my youth empowerment program. And so through that, I'm going to offer girls honor training, which is similar to the Nation of Islam's what's it called? Girls training, where they learn how to cook and how to clean and just how to honor yourself. And then also teaching financial literacy. I wrote a whole presentation on this stuff. So that's what I had it ready to go on slideshows. And then also a reading village for our children, because to combat the preschool to prison pipeline, it's very important that our children are reading at or above grade level by the time they're in the 3rd grade, because it says that they build prisons based off of the 3rd grade reading scores. And then lastly, right now I'm working on a startup, which is EV for my community, electric vehicles for my community. You know, some people don't know, but they just signed that huge infrastructure law. So I think it's $408 billion going towards transitioning everyone to electric vehicles. And so my goal is that, you know, usually disadvantaged communities are the last to receive these things. And so my goal and my mission is just to transition disadvantaged communities to electronic vehicles. Also offer the training to empower our people when it comes to having a competitive edge within the upcoming job market. So to teach them how to work on the electronic vehicles, and then also the charging stations. This is a tiered business that I'm putting together. So then once I put the electronic cars within our community and then train people how to work on the electric cars and electronic vehicles, then I would like to put the electronic stations within the community to support that.
That is amazing. Please tag me on Twitter with that information. I'm happy to retweet it. And those who will be interested to see it will see it. And hopefully make some great contacts for you there. Dr. Imhotep, he found the word you were listening to, looking for, the Muslim girls training. And I think that's really great. I mean, I think in general, we should all be training our girls with the basics. That's why I said what I said. We typically get that type of training. We leave the house of our parents knowing how to cook, knowing how to clean, but we should not ever be limited in that. And I thank you for sharing that. Please tag me, and I'm happy to retweet it. Kat, go ahead and share with us what you'd like for us to know. Any books or any part of this that you want us to zero in on.
I just want to thank you guys for the exchange and for the discussion today. That's all I have to say.
She's so shy and modest. I guess I'm the big mouth here. No, I appreciate both of you, and Dr. Imhotep does too. He's saluting you too, because you are dynamic. You are doing really great work. And I really anticipate both of you doing much more throughout the country. You're right there in your own sweet spots right now. And I know there's a lot to be accomplished, but I believe that if you consider the needs of all of our Black people, you know, not just where you are. And I'm not saying you need to be expansive. I'm just saying I want you to realize that the work that you are doing, that look ahead work with the infrastructure bill, I think that is very, very progressive thought. And that's how we always have to be. Get that training to our young people, to our Black young people, so that they can be those who corner the market in the repair and the substance of the EV stations around here in our communities, because they are in our communities as well. So kudos to you for looking ahead. And Kat, I really can't wait to see you publish your dissertation work as a book that we are all privy to peruse and glean from you, because you will not be able to stretch yourself, but we are looking forward to the great things that you're going to do to help build the sisterhood in our communities. And so I say thank you to all of you, to both of you, to Reverend Dawn, who had to leave. Keep her in your prayers. You heard her heart, and that she's back taking care of herself in terms of her emotional health. And that is something that we all have to do in order to be here. I am just so privileged to have both of you. You all, I am at your disposal. If you think that there's a way that I can help you, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. I will do whatever I can to help advance your cause, because I believe that is as much a part of sisterhood as anything else. To all the Black women out there, I salute you during this month that they've set aside for Women's History Month. I salute my Black sisters, because you are powerful. And I wish that the very best would be yours today, tomorrow, and forever in your lives. God bless you all. And thanks for everyone who tuned in today. Ladies, be blessed, and thank you.